Good morning and good afternoon, everyone. My name is Alexandra and I'm the webinar hostess, which means I'll handle the questions and answers. During this presentation, I have enabled the questions panel, which you'll see on the right-hand side of your screen. A quick tip, you may need to push the little plus sign or the arrow to expand the panel. This session is being recorded and will be made available to all attendees should you care to listen to it again or share it with colleagues. Now, I'd like to introduce our speaker for today, Andrew Larandos, who will be presenting healthcare and data protection with MOVEit. Andrew, take it away.
Perfect. Thanks, Alex. Yeah, so today we're going to be talking about moving files around in a protected environment, and specifically today we're talking in the realm of healthcare. So to give you an idea of what we're actually going to be talking about today, basically we're going to be going through being able to prove that with these file movements that are occurring within the organization today, we're able to ensure regulatory and compliance of the PHI data that's moving. We'll actually go through the workflow and kind of a demonstration of the automated billing process and scripting as well. We'll actually walk through the solution and see what that process might look like, as well as just the overall compliance and security of the file movements, again, within the organization today. We'll also touch on why healthcare providers choose MOVEit over other solutions, and actually go through that demonstration portion here as well. So in the healthcare organization, obviously, as you may know, being in that field, there's quite a bit of sensitive data moving around. Now, as you may or may not know, within the industry, there is a very valid concern that we want to protect this data in motion and at rest. And we want to be able to alleviate some of these concerns that are coming up within the industry of actually experiencing a data breach, ensuring that we're protecting that data. So even if somebody were to gain access to it, they're not going to have usable data. Not only that, obviously, if we want to eliminate the possibility of a breach in general, and then ensure that we're effectively restricting user access to the roles that they're going to need access to, and not actually go anything beyond that effectively. So we want to ensure that users are following policies that we can define from an organizational level. Now, being able to ensure this regulatory compliance is really going to be based on a few things. From the business needs, it's really going to be able to provide a compliant means of transferring this data, this PHI data, to our vendors, training partners, billers, payers, et cetera. So we want to be able to transact this data in a compliant manner. Now, the way that MOVEit is able to provide that is through encryption at rest and in motion. So we're actually going to be leveraging protocol encryption for the transfer. So while it's in motion, and at rest, we're actually going to be encrypting using an AES 256. So pretty high level of encryption on the back end, just to ensure that, again, nobody can come in through the back end and retrieve that data and manipulate it in any way, or even read it. Obviously, as a business, you need to depend on being able to effectively say who had access to any given data at any given point in time, who did in fact access it, or where did that data go. So we need an audit trail that is going to be compliant and be able to provide us that level of visibility. Now, from the MOVEit solution, we're able to provide that using detailed audit logs, which we will take a look at today, at least a high-level glimpse into them. But they are stored in a tamper-evident audit log, so they would be on a non-reputable audit log source. Now, of course, you are very likely going to be under HIPAA, potentially GDPR or CCPA, other extraneous things like that, potentially even PCI. So there's quite a few compliance regulatory regulations that we might fall under. And basically, MOVEit is able to help you with those. So MOVEit is able to provide you all the tools to be compliant, Obviously, from a responsibility matrix standpoint, there are a few things that would need to be done internally as well, but we're able to provide you all the tools to provide a compliant solution to the business. Now, being able to do that, there's really a few things here. So, I mentioned GDPR, HIPAA, HITRUST, potentially PCI, but we're able to do that pretty much out of the box. There's really not anything that you would need to do other than maybe turn on multi-factor authentication for administrators or various little things like that. But all of those tools to be compliant and provide the visibility into these transactions is built-in functionality. So you can be up and running very quickly with MOVEit. Now, this is actually what we'll cover in the demonstration, so I won't spend too much time on it today, or on this slide rather, excuse me. But effectively, you're probably transmitting a lot of 837s, 835s, and we basically are able to provide a solution that is going to be able to automatically transfer those as they're being output or we're receiving them, and provide them to the resource that is ultimately going to consume that EDI data. So while MOVEit is not necessarily going to do any translation or anything like that out of the box, we are able to augment that EDI process, be able to transmit this data back and forth, and be able to provide that visibility into those transactions. So today you might be leveraging things like dispersed scripts or just plain FTP servers for the receiving of these files. We can eliminate all of that, provide a more secure platform. Now, basically, coming back to the security and compliance standpoint, I mentioned these, but they are very important within the MFT space. So we want to ensure that the data is encrypted at rest. We potentially want to make sure that that data does not reside in the DMZ. There's various architectural components there. And being able to integrate with existing resources, potentially like authentication resources, LDAP, maybe we want to go out to a SAML, IDP, or identity provider. Those are things that are going to be built in as well. Now, as far as automating, typically when I'm talking to customers, they are dealing with dispersed scripts. There are things that are actually being developed internally. There may be an individual or maybe a small team of individuals that might be responsible for this. But there's some issues surrounding that. One is we're not able to necessarily get the historical visibility into that process. Not only that, we might want some notifications coming out of that aren't necessarily there today. But more importantly, I think in that scenario is the fact that if somebody were to leave the organization that's responsible for those processes, we don't necessarily have a way of being able to see, what is going on in this thing? How do we update it if a password changes? There's a lot of risk at play there. And that could be if the person leaves the organization, if, that just gets left behind and then we forget about that process and now we need to figure out what broke at some point. It's very difficult to actually figure out where those scripts are in a lot of cases. So within the MOVEit solution, we're actually able to centralize all of those processes into a single resource, which we'll take a look at from an architectural standpoint. But we can centralize all of them there. We can actually make it so that there's no scripting requirements to create these processes. So it shortens our development time quite a bit. And if we need to go in and make changes, it's actually a web-based administration portal. So it's potentially easy for the administrators going in and creating these processes, or maybe we even want to open this up for the business line users to be able to go in and look at their own logging. That is actually something that we could be able to provide them as well. So there's quite a few benefits of going to a MFT automated process as opposed to these dispersed scripts. Now, moving in general for healthcare, what is going to be the most important components there? And it's really going to be the encryption at rest, as I continue to mention, and part of that is going to be the FIPS 140-2 validated AES 256 encryption that is going to be occurring on those files as they're being received on the back end. So we can ensure that nobody's going in and modifying those or picking them up without us knowing. Obviously, we can produce workflows that are going to allow users to come in and easily manage these processes, either from an automated standpoint or if potentially they have more person-to-person workflows. That can be accomplished as well. But actually being able to meet SLAs is a very important part as well. So we can actually set up specific time frames, state that we should receive a file within this time frame. If we don't, we can actually trigger an alert. So we could let somebody know we didn't receive those files. So being more proactive in that regard is quite beneficial in most cases. Also, as part of SLAs, something that a lot of the time gets left behind is the concept of business continuity. So if we lose a data center, we want to be able to quickly spin up services out somewhere else, have a very low recovery time objective and a recovery point objective. So there's various architectural options for that as well. And that could be a single data center. We can span out to multiple data centers. So quite a few different options there, depending on what the requirements would be. And of course, actually being able to go in, see where is this data going. So if we're going to get audited, we might need to potentially produce a list of all users. And when were they created? When did they last log in? When did they last reset their password? We're going to be able to produce that very quickly. There's probably about 100 or so built-in reports, but we can go in and customize those as well. So again, very flexible there, depending on what the business requirements are going to be. Obviously, going from dispersed scripts or FTP servers, things like that, and centralizing those processes, we're really going to be able to streamline the process of both onboarding new relationships or workflows, as well as being able to go in and allow users to take a look at those logs or potentially share files of really any size. So there are no file size limitations. If we're dealing with some imaging, for example, those can get quite large. That's not a problem to ship those back and forth through this solution. And of course, being able to see the files being transmitted, being able to define the users or user sets that can accomplish these workflows, and then being able to go in and define that and allow them to just do their workflow as opposed to jumping through some hoops. Now, why organizations or healthcare organizations choose MOVEit? It's really going to come down to a few things. Obviously, patient appointment reminders. I'd say that's maybe a little bit of an outlier, but that definitely could be something that could be sent out by MOVEit. More so, probably going to be the medical reports. So, we maybe need to deliver these to various offices or things like that. We can do that. Obviously, medical imaging, like I mentioned, can be quite large. So in MOVEit, there are no file size limitations. We can send those image files, no problem. A really common one would be billing and payment data. I mean, obviously, this is really the lifeblood of the organization. This is how we're getting paid. So that's something that we really want to be able to gain that visibility on, be able to ensure that these files are being sent and being received ultimately. Being able to provide those reports. So like I mentioned, all those canned reports or being able to create your own depending on what the requirements are going to be. Those are all things that you can go in really quickly and easily and set up and put in a readable format. And then obviously claim submissions as well. So we can handle all of that. So Now, to give you an idea of what MOVEit is or what it looks like from a kind of workflow or data flow perspective, this might look like a pretty noisy slide at first, but we can really simplify it down into two primary components. One would be the MOVEit transfer server. And this is if, for example, we need to provide a resource for our trading partners to pick up or drop off files from your location effectively. So MOVEit transfer is, we can really think of it as kind of an FTP server in the most rudimentary of terms, but that one is going to allow users to come in through a web interface, through FTPS, SFTP, and they're going to be able to come in and upload or download their files. This server is the one that would also be encrypting at rest. So as those files are being received, we encrypt them on the fly. It's totally transparent to the user. There's no key exchanges or anything like that. And when we're doing that, that's ultimately going to accomplish a few things. One is, as I mentioned a few times here, nobody's going to be able to come in and pick up that data, manipulate it, read it in any way. But by doing that, we also are going to require that users authenticate. So we're going to require that they have credentials, pre-shared credentials in that case. We're also going to produce an audit log based on their activity. So because they can't go in through the back end, they have to go through the MOVEit service, we're actually going to be able to have that non-reputable audit log to say, yeah, this user came in at this time and picked up these files. So that visibility is really going to be key. And obviously that could be a user, it could be an external organization that we need to definitively say, yeah, you came in from this IP address at this time and picked up this file. So just being able to do that is very powerful. The other primary component is going to be MOVEit automation. And MOVEit automation is effectively going to be the workflow component. It would act as a client. That's not something that external users would be interacting with directly. But our internal user base would be able to potentially access that server, define their workflows. It has its own built-in scheduler. We can do built-in things like PGP encrypts or decrypts if that's going to be required. But that is going to be really the engine behind all of this, to say, when we receive a file on that MOVEit transfer server, we need to pull it internally, deliver it to a network share. Potentially in the demonstration portion that we're going to go through today, our EDI process is then going to pick up that file, consume it. So that's really what the automation component's about. Now, in the demonstration portion, I am going to be interacting with the MOVEit transfer server, of course. We could leverage automation independently or MOVEit transfer server independently. They're not tied together in any way. They do have some integrations if both are in an environment, but there's no dependency on one another. And with that being said, if, for example, we did not need to provide a location for users to come in, pick up, drop off files, we could take out this bottom section here and just leverage automation for the movement of files. And those could go directly to a vendor or trading partner's FTP server or SFTP server in most cases. And we could either pick up or drop off from their server directly. So acting as a client, it gives us that flexibility. And we'll kind of look at what that would look like from defining those various locations. So with that being said, I think we can just kind of go into a demonstration at this point and take a look at what the solution looks like itself. So the example that I have set up here is we'll start out with the automation server. And on this server, as I mentioned, it's really about connectivity between endpoints, sources, destinations, etc. And defining those is very straightforward. All we would do is come in, say add host, maybe it's a SFTP host, give it a name, a host name or IP address, username and password, not a problem. If we need to do key-based authentication, automation has its own built-in key ring, so we can centralize the management of all of those as well. But from there, we can go out and create processes surrounding these. So any of these are any of these hosts are going to be reusable throughout any of our processes. So we can really go in and say, maybe one vendor that we're dealing with is going to have 10 processes that we're delivering or picking up from them. If a password changes, we just go to one host definition to update that. So again, simplifies that process quite a bit from scripting in most cases. Now, the example that I have set up today will walk through just a few tasks here, but basically we're in our use case, we're producing an 837. We want to upload that to our MOVEit transfer server and make it available to our external party who's going to consume that, send back an 835. So here we have an 837 outbound task. To create this, it's just creating the framework here and then coming in and adding steps, sources, or destinations. That's really it. I will preface that with this is a relatively straightforward workflow that we would see. There are capabilities of introducing conditional logic, custom scripts, things like that. We're not really necessarily going to dive into that today, but those functions are available. So basically all I did here was come in, add a network share source where we're looking in a 837 directory in this case. Again, very simplified process, but just gives you an idea. And we can go out and browse that. We can see that we have some sample data out here that we're going to be sending out. And we're specifically looking for files that, in this case, that start with 837. And obviously we're wildcarding out after that. So just to ensure that we're only picking up 837 data out of this folder. Obviously, your workflows are going to have various naming conventions that we can meet from that perspective there, but just to give you an idea. Now, also in this use case, we're actually going to be archiving this file. So we're going to prepend the date timestamp in this case. So there's some built-in macros that we can leverage there. And all that we would need to do that is uncheck the use original file name and then add our macros in front of it. Obviously, we can do other file name manipulation as well. This is just a quick example of it. Now, as I mentioned, in our use case, we're actually going to be uploading to the MOVEit transfer server into a 837 folder for our insurance plan to come in and pick up. So same thing there. We just go in, specify the destination from our host list, and then specify the folder that it's going into. So that is really it. Now, from the workflow perspective, or from the scheduling perspective, rather, excuse me, we can come in and specify maybe certain days of the week. Maybe we only want this to run on weekdays. But in this case, we're just looking for anything coming out of our system on that network share every day of the week, 24 hours a day. If we did have a scenario where we were going to have a file come out by 4 p.m. every day, and we did not have a file come out by 4 p.m., it's really just as simple as specifying that time frame, and then coming out here and saying, if we don't pick up a file within that time frame, we need to log a failure. So this is where we can be proactive in that regard. We can actually send out notifications. We can put a failure in the audit log and effectively let the party internally responsible know something broke in this process. We need to figure out what happened. Now, this is just one example of a potential failure, but it could be, so from a guaranteed delivery standpoint, it could just be that we didn't actually, we weren't able to connect out to that destination server. Maybe our password expired or something like that. We could get that notification through email, and you'd have a really good idea of what happened before you even get to the server. Obviously, there are built-in retries, and that's all customizable as far as how many retries to do, how long to wait in between. So that is all customizable as well. Now, for that notification itself, we can specify who that's going out to, and this could be a list of users. This is just an example here. But then we can include macro information here as well, like the task name, status, maybe the full error description in the email. So again, they'd have a really good idea of what happened prior to ever coming to the system and looking at logs, if they even needed to. So from here, normally this would just run based on the schedule. For the demonstration, I just have it disabled. So we can go ahead and run it manually. We can go back out here and see that running tasks are actually going to go to the top of our list. So we can see what is actively running on this server right now. Now, as it completes, it drops back down to the list and it gives us its result. When did we last run? What was the result? How many files were sent? Now, obviously, in this case, I only had one file out there. This could be hundreds, thousands of files. That's not a problem. But obviously, as part of this, we're going to want to be able to go in and look at those files that were sent. So we can actually go in, view the run history, and see all of our previous task runs that have occurred. Now, obviously, in this scenario, I only have two, but this would show quite a bit of historical information here. And how long those are retained are definable. But we can actually go in, let's look at our run that we just did. So for that run, we want to see the file activity. So it's only going to show us for the one that just occurred. But now we can actually see what files did we pick up, where did they go, what processes were run against them. So we can see that we picked up the file from our network path in this case. We sent it out to our archive and renamed it, and then also sent out to our processing directory. So we can drill down even further if we wanted to and see the activity details for a particular file transmission and see how long it took, where it went, the size of the file, etc. But this could be a list of, like I mentioned, 1,000+ files. So we want to be able to drill down to the particular file really quickly. And we can do that. We can just come in and do 837s. Obviously, this isn't going to filter down to anything, but if this was a list of other files, we would filter down to that particular file name. And then obviously we can filter by activity as well. So if we only want to see the files being picked up, we could do the download action and see all of the files in just a line item basis. So that's the visibility from the automation standpoint. Now, obviously that file got uploaded to our MOVEit transfer server. It got made available for that external agency to come in and pick that up. So we can actually go out to our transfer server now and log in as that external user. So obviously this would be a predefined account that we would have shared with them already, and that they might have that vendor or trading partner that we're dealing with might actually have their own automated process that's doing this. But if it were ever a manual process, they would be able to come in here. We've defined a folder structure for them to come in. We now have an 837 directory that they can come in and pick up this data. So they would be able to download it really simply. Again, no file size limitation even through the web interface here. After they've downloaded it, they could delete it. As an administrator on this system, you can actually define retention policies as well. So you could actually specify how long these files are going to sit out here, even if they don't delete them, which in a lot of cases they might not. So we can go ahead, we can delete that file, say yes. Now, from this insurance provider, we can go in and they're going to have an 835 response that's going to come back to us now. So we can go out there. They're going to have the ability to upload their files now. On that other folder, we had a permissioned out where they would not be able to upload files. But they can go ahead and upload them here. Again, this is just an example through the web interface. They could be coming in over FTPS or SFTP. Well, once they've done that, that file is going to be up there. We can now pull it down with automation. And we can take a look at that in just a second here. Now, obviously, these this user authenticating, this partner one in this case, authenticating to this portal, their activity interacting with these files that have been uploaded is something that we want to control pretty tightly. Whether that is from a permissioning perspective, if it is from a visibility perspective. So if we come in and actually log in as the administrator, there's really a few steps that we would do to onboard one of these parties to do this process. We would be able to come in, specify a user account for them. I have that created here, but effectively all it would be is coming in and saying add user. We just give them a username, email address. This is also where we could leverage external authentication sources. So if we wanted to connect in with LDAP or a SAML provider, we can definitely do that. They would still have a pointer user account here. And that's just so that we can set various service level settings, what protocol can they come in on, et cetera. But we would be able to do that very quickly. Now, when a user is provisioned, they are going to be in the concept of least privilege. So they would not have any rights by default. They would be able to authenticate, but not actually be able to do anything on here. So we can provide them group membership. That's one way of easing permissions management. Maybe we have a common distribution folder that everybody needs access to. We just add them to a distribution group, and they would inherit all of those properties. Or if there's multiple users from a particular trading partner that we're dealing with, they all need access to the same folders. We can manage it that way as well. But in this case, we just have a single user going out to this directory and with permissions on it. So we can go into that directory that we have created. Actually creating these directory structures is just as simple as saying add folder and give it a name. That's literally it. Once we've created that, we can go in and specify the permissions. So in this case, we provided our partner one in the 835 directory the ability to upload files and get a directory listing. That's it. They can't pull files back out once they uploaded them. They can't delete them. Those are not going to be options. Now, if it ever were a manual process, typically in this type of scenario, it would not be a manual process, but we could send out notifications to let people know they have new files available. This is where we could actually define the retention policy, and these are all per folder. So we can define these in these directories, and other directories are going to have other restrictions on them. Now, also as part of this, we can actually come in and say that this use case is only going to have a certain extension on it. So we can say maybe we want to deny all files except the ones that have .txt or CSV extension. So obviously there too, that's going to be very much so based on the individual use case for this directory, but just knowing that that is there, very helpful. Now, from the visibility standpoint, we can now come in, look at our logs. Logs are very good. They're going to be pretty linear, but we can really come in and see every single action that has occurred on this server, whether that's administrative actions, user actions, authentication, notifications going out from this system. All of that is going to have an auto log entry. And actually, if we go into a particular record, we can click on the timestamp and get additional information as far as how long did that transfer take, what agent did they come in with, what IP address did they come in with. So we're going to have visibility into all of that as well. Now, I said the logging is pretty linear. So if we wanted to get more general metrics out of this system from more of a management or auditing or administrative perspective, we can definitely do that. And this is where I mentioned that there's probably about 100 or so built-in reports. But just a really quick one to kind of give you an example. We'll pull up a user list here. And the nice part here is that we do publish the schema here. So if you have a particular workflow or a particular reporting requirement that you're going to need, You can create your own custom reports and really pull out whatever information you're going to need. But here we can actually see that when a user was created, when they were last modified, last logged in, password change, etc., all in a default report. So we can really quickly and easily, go in and see, are there some users that we can maybe get rid of? We could actually set up automated processes to do that as well based on time frames. Pretty flexible and customizable platform in general for MoveIt. Now, obviously, that user uploaded a 835. We need to pull that back in. So we actually have another task for an 835 inbound. And it's effectively the same thing, just in reverse. So source, destinations, an archive, a schedule. But here too, we can go ahead and run that. If we go out here, we can actually see it processing. This one runs really quickly, but same thing here. We can go in, we can view the run history, see all of those previous task runs, and then go into the individual file activity and be able to see exactly what happened here. Now, of course, this one I have some extra filters on. There we go. So we can actually see that file, what happened with it. In this case, I only have the download as well. So now we can actually see that here. So, but again, so really the key component or the key takeaways from this are going to be, number one, we can consolidate all of those processes into one platform. So one point to come in, manage all of these processes. Number two, you can actually have visibility into these processes where you might not today. So we can definitively say they got to a particular location, they were not picked up, what have you, and be proactive in that regard. And then number three is really being able to provide encryption at rest on that MoveIt transfer server so that we can ensure the integrity and safety of those files while they're at rest out on that server. So from the demonstration standpoint, that's what I had today. Obviously, your use case is going to be a little bit different from this. So we'd love to have a conversation with you regarding your use case and how it would fit within MoveIt. So definitely let us know if that is the case. But with that being said, I think that would conclude the demonstration portion. So Alex, I'll open it up if we got any questions.
Sure. We've gotten quite a few questions as the webinar has been proceeding, but don't forget, if you have additional questions, you can put them in the questions panel or in the chat on the right-hand side of the screen. So what is the benefit of going with a managed file transfer product over an FTP server?
Yeah, good question. So the primary benefits of a MFT service over a plain FTP server are really going to be a few things. One, you're going to be able to integrate in with external authentication sources. You're going to be able to provide the encryption at rest is really going to be a key component, as well as then the visibility in the audit log. So typically an FTP server, a plain FTP server, is going to write out in more of a debug log fashion, where it's writing out to a flat file. If there's something that occurs where a user can't authenticate, we might have to go to that. All of that and more is going to be visible through the web interface within MoveIt, and it's actually written out to a database, so we could query that directly. We could integrate with a SIM. There's quite a few different integration points there, but I think that's really going to be the few key components. Just being much more of an enterprise-grade solution than kind of more of a prosumer solution.
Great. If I were to say have an interest in purchasing MoveIt right now, how easy is it to install, and how quickly can we get set up?
Yeah, another excellent question. So MoveIt is going to deploy as a service on top of a Windows server. So as long as we have a Windows server, and it could be virtualized, it could be physical, it could be in cloud provider, But as long as we have a Windows Server to install on, Move It to install really takes 20 minutes or less in most cases. It's just kind of click through, walk through. We're going to deploy as a complete solution. And the nice part is, you can be up and running very quickly. Now that would be more of a on-prem license. There is actually another deployment option that I didn't necessarily cover here, which would be a cloud deployment. So we actually have a SaaS offering that we've gone through third-party independent audits. We have HIPAA, PCI, SOX, et cetera. But so with that solution, we can actually onboard you very quickly and get you up and running really, really quick. So depending on, again, what your requirements are going to be for that, there's quite a few different options for deployment.
Great. Those are all the questions we have that have come in. So I wanted to say thank you, Andrew, and thank you to everyone on the phone who joined us today. I hope everyone is having a healthy week ahead and happy April. Thank you, everyone, and goodbye.